Welcome back to the next video in our building your own version of Uber series. Now in the last video I gave you a little bit of an overview of what we're building, but in this one I'm going to take the unconventional step of starting by building out our very own user interface. As I mentioned in the previous video, the reason I want to do that is because this is quite a complicated setup, and my feeling is if I show you the UI first, and I know you can see it here, but in a little bit more detail and take you through the process, then I think it will be more obvious why I'm making the decisions I am and putting together the database and the various different workflows that we've got here. So, and one thing to bear in mind, this is on the rider version of the app. Clearly we have a driver version as well, but we'll build that a little bit later on because we can actually skip a lot of the work by just duplicating the rider app we've already got and then making the necessary changes. But before we go ahead and crack on, let me just show you the app in action, just so you've got a feel for exactly what we're going to build. And one thing I want you to pay attention to, immediately I've just launched the home screen here. Notice that the map here is different from the map that kind of showed up in the more traditional Google Maps colours on the app builder. I'll show you why that is a little bit later on. But for now, this is what our home screen looks like. We've got a map, we've got a little profile page here. It's supposed to load up a list of rides here, but because I'm on the demo version, it doesn't have those yet. You can hit change address, it'll bring you to a form. And if I go over here, hit where to, this is the location search that I've got. Again, if I had any rides done already in this demo, it would show up here, but I can just put in 28 Banner Street, which for some reason has been the random address I picked on Google Maps as a little test address, and one I'll continue to use. But we come to this kind of ride confirmation screen. I can go ahead and put in the Stripe payment details, which I think I've just typed in wrong there. Let me just grab the card number from test. So this is a test payment number, which I'll show you how to use a little bit later on. Oops, of course, I've put the date in the past. So there we go, we've got our little screen, hit pay now, and that will bring us across to this awaiting pickup screen. We've got a little bit of a timer here, and what I'm going to do off screen is I'm going to just pop into the driver app. I can see the rides appearing now. I'm going to hit accept ride. I know you can't see that, but what you will see is if I now refresh this, go to refresh page, it now says driver on the way, and if I hit user picked up and then I refresh here, this is going to take me to the final kind of on the way screen. And then, when the ride's over, the user can simply hit finish ride. They can rate. I've set a picture as a dog of the driver. Clearly you would put a different picture there. You can rate the driver however you want, hit rate driver, and it'll bring you back to the home screen. So that's the kind of flow we're trying to create. I'm sure when you build your own version of an Uber app, your driver probably won't have a giant fluffy Samoyed dog as the profile photo, but other than that, this is kind of the sort of thing that we're trying to build here. Of course, you can hit log out, etc., and get back to the usual sign up screen. So now that we know what we're trying to build, let's go ahead and start building our very own version. So I'm going to hit create new app. I'm going to hit native mobile app. I'm going to just make this a blank little screen here, and we're just going to call it, we'll call it Uber Clone 2, because clearly I've already built Uber Clone 1. Now, in terms of the primary colours, Uber's pretty simple. The primary colour is black and the secondary colour is white. I'm not going to put hex codes in here because it's already got them pre-assigned. The top left is black, the bottom right is white. I believe it's that case on all Adalo instances, and I'm going to hit create right here. And again, we'll come back and create another app a little bit later for our drivers. So we immediately have the home screen here, and let's concentrate on just getting that right first of all. Now, one thing I want to show you is if I hit the marketplace here, there's a few little add-ons that I'm using to get this right that are not by default installed on Adalo. First of all, I've got the map, so I need you to go and just grab that. I am also using the star rating here. There's a few other things, by the way, you could use here. If you wanted to sign in with Google, then absolutely grab that and wire it up as well. I'm not going to use it here, but I am using the Stripe kit. So Stripe is our preferred payment supplier, and it's who I'm going to use to take payments. We've got some other videos on Stripe if you want to learn a little bit more. And beyond that, I'm sure there's one other thing I've got here. Yes, I've got this little countdown. It's done by a company called Minimum Studio. They're really, really cool. Fantastic designers. They actually build no-code apps for you. So if you're ever struggling, really good place to check out. And that should do it. You can see there's a few more things in here, but nothing else that we need for this particular build. So make sure you grab the countdown, stripe, the map, and the star rating. Okay. So now that we've got that anyway, let's dive in and start making things. Now I'm going to just start by putting the map on there. I think it's a pretty good way just to orientate us in terms of what we've got going on. And for some reason my map's not showing up. So let me just try hitting installed. I'll put it back in. And there we go, it's showing back up there. I'm not sure what caused that. Looks like some sort of little glitch on the side here. But I'm going to grab a map and drag it straight in here. And there's a few options on here. We'll worry about configuring them a little bit later on. But one that I am going to configure right now is if I click onto style, I have this option to custom style JSON. Now if you've watched some of my other videos on Adalo, you might have seen me do this before. But essentially you can go to this website here called mapstyle.withgoogle.com. And it starts out looking like this, but what it's going to let me do is pick the exact map style I want. Now I'm just going to keep it simple, pick dark and take the code from there, but you can start to customize colors, you can hit more options here and literally change every detail of how this map appears. You know, if you wanted the roads, for example, to show up on a different color, then you could come in here, you can change the fill color, for example, of the geometry, and you can see I've just highlighted them yellow. I could make them green, whatever. In fact, I might do that just because it looks kind of cool to have green roads, like the Matrix or something. But when you're done editing, you can hit the little finish button, and it has this little section here that says copy and paste the JSON into your app or website code. If you haven't heard of JSON before, it's a little bit, you know, it's closer to coding than most stuff you'll have seen. It is a little kind of, we call it a markup language. Essentially, it's a very specific way of writing stuff down. So you don't really need to know what it is. All you have to do is hit copy JSON, come back to Adalo, and then paste that straight into this little block here. That's all you have to do at the minute. And what actually happens then is when I go ahead and log into the app, which I'm not going to do just now, but when I go ahead and log into the app, that map will show up the exact same way we just styled here. So we'll use that same code again and again throughout. I'm just going to go ahead and make this the full size of the screen that I can see. If I wanted to adjust the screen height, maybe to cover bigger phones, for example, I can just do set that, for example, to 812, which is the size of, I think, the iPhone Pro. So you can extend that map, make it a little bit bigger as well. But the main thing that we need on here is the little input. So if you've seen Uber before, typically the way it works is when you log in, there's an input field there where you can start typing in the address. Uber will pop up this screen that lets you search for the location, see your history, etc., and that all appears. So you might be tempted to go and grab a text input, but actually what we're going to do is we're going to use a button disguised as an input field. So this is what the button looks like by default, and I'm going to go ahead and make a few changes to that. First, I'm going to change the text to where to, which is what Uber, I think, actually says on the app. I'm then going to go ahead and delete this little icon. I'm going to come and make a few other changes as well to make it feel kind of less button-like. The first of which is I'm going to switch the icon and text color to black, and I'm going to switch the button color to white. I'm then going to change the button style, and that is going to change to an outlined button. And of course, sorry, it's reset the color there. Now this might feel a little bit kind of confusing or not immediately familiar to you. That's okay. You can come in here, you can play around with these yourself to get the right look. But I know how to make it kind of look roughly like Uber. And so the other thing I've got to do here is just give that a nice little rounding. And if I click off here, you'll see it's starting to look a little bit more like an actual sort of a text field. The other thing that might be worth doing for the app is just unhitting uppercase. Now, there's a few changes I would kind of like to make that are a little bit harder. I can change the text color to be a little bit lighter, which again makes it feel more like an input. One of the things that I can't do is I can't kind of move this text over to the left, you know, the way that you would if it was like a sort of traditional text box. Let me just show you as a little bit of a comparison. So it's not perfect, but over time, Adalo are just going to bring out more and more options. But you can see it's not exactly like a text box, but we're kind of getting there. So we're going to have this big button here, put it right in the middle. In fact, I'll bring up the map just a little bit more. And what's going to happen is when the user clicks this button, they're going to take us to a new screen called the location search screen. So what I'm going to do is just hit add action, a link to a new screen right now. And we'll call that one location search. And unusually, I'm going to start with a blank screen. I'll show you just why in a second. So if you have Uber on your phone, and if not, I recommend grabbing it just to check this out, or at least go and Google some screenshots. But I'm going to show you what the screen looks a little bit like when you put it together. So in this one, we are going to have a text input. So I'm going to jump down here, and I'm going to need this text input, and I'll just configure this slightly. So let's give that a little bit of rounding, for example. 20 sound about right. We give that a little bit of rounding, and I'm just going to adjust the size a little bit. Again, you could do this yourself. You could do this yourself in the edit styles, or you can just adjust it by hand. I'm going to set the padding a little bit just to space it out. Now, you don't have to stick to all this kind of stuff. You can skip the video on a little bit if you don't really, care about the styling. But taking a little bit of time just to get it looking good. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give that a name. I'm going to call that the home address input, or the current address input actually, it's probably a better name. So current address input. And we'll come back to use that a little bit later. Put placeholder as where are you? And then I'm going to copy that. So I just hit Control C. I'm going to press Control V. You can see on the left I've now got a new component. Drag that down ever so slightly. Change that to where are you going? Or actually, where to would probably be a smarter thing to write. And we'll call this the to address input. So we've got the current address and the to address. I've just copy and pasted it, so we've got pretty much the same inputs. And just to add a little bit of visual flair, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of little shapes here. So if you've used Uber, you'll know what I'm about to put on here. It's got like this little kind of a square that goes here, and then actually it's the other way around. There's a square that goes down here, and then there's a circle that goes above it. So let me just put a circle in as well, and then there's a little line that connects them. Now this is a little bit fiddly. Might take me a little while just to get this exactly right, but I wanted to show you anyway, just so you've got an idea of how it works. I'm going to set the width and the height here of 20. If you've watched my other videos as well, you know that essentially when you give an image the same width, same height, and set the rounding to full, which is done by default here, then it gives you a circle. But we're just going to use the shape. We'll go to the background, we'll set that to black. Again, that's a little bit big, to be honest. I'm set it to a little slightly grey. That's a little bit big, so let me just adjust that down. We'll go for 10 height, 10 width. That looks a little bit more like it. Now similarly on the rectangle, if I want it to be a perfect square, then I'm going to have to give it the same sort of treatment, give it same height, same width. And we're going to make that a little bit bigger, because again on the app itself it's a little bit bigger. I'm going to set the background to black, so there's a slight contrast here, which is good, that's what we want. I think that's still a little bit too big, so we'll just bring that down. Let's call it 14 and 14, see if that works. Yep, that looks more like it. And then the last thing I want to do is draw a line between these two, just sort of connecting them up. I just want to make sure, by the way, that that is more or less equal. I'm just using my arrow keys to move that down. But the thing that I want to do here is just connect them with a little line. And so you might be tempted to pop in here, go to simple, and grab the line. But actually you don't want to do that, because that can only create a horizontal line. So what I'm going to do is grab another rectangle. I'm going to edit it, so let's make that black, and maybe a little bit off grey. I'm just looking at the app on the side here just to get it exactly right. Make it a little bit off grey like that. I'm going to come to edit styles, and I'm going to keep the height for now. I mean, let's just figure out what that height should be. I'll drag it down slightly like that. So if we think that's roughly what the line height should be, Just try and center it up. What I can do is change the width to about 2 pixels, and that creates a line out of my rectangle, except obviously this line goes up and down. And if I just line everything up, it's a little bit harder to drag these and get the right guide rails at this kind of height, so you've kind of got to do it by eye slightly. But we just line that up. Let's just bring this a little bit closer, and then bring this up to match it. Let's make our line a little bit smaller, and I did say this would get a little bit fiddly, so feel free to skip on slightly, but if you want to watch what I'm doing, I'm just going to set the height to 25, yep, and that should do nicely. And there we go. So you don't have to copy that visual flair, but that's kind of what Uber has. Obviously Uber's looks a little bit better, and you can spend some more time on it when you're not filming and actually make it look exactly right. But we need that little location search there. The other thing that we need in here is a really simple list, and this is going to be a list of all the previous rides that the user's taken. So this will be a little history tab. Now I'm not going to actually configure it just yet, but what I'm going to do is put the list header on, and that will pop up this little word here. I'm going to rename this to history. I'm going to change the formatting from semi-bold, think let's try light. Yep, right down there. Change the colour. I just want to give this a sort of faded out appearance. That's maybe a bit too faded. That's spot on. That's the kind of thing that I want to create. And what we'll do later is we'll configure all of this to kind of match up, but we can change this to an icon right now. And since this is going to be history, I'm going to look for some sort of little timer icon here. Now there's a few. I quite like that one. It looks pretty familiar actually. It looks a lot like the Uber app, and I'll also put on the right hand section here as well. So there we go, we've got a list, and probably the last thing I want to just pop in there is a nice big button that says continue, and we'll drag that out a little bit, give that a different icon. I'm going to use this icon quite a lot, which is car. It's not quite called car, it's called directions car. And I'm going to just use that as my sort of Uber symbol here almost. You could put your own logo in or whatever. This will do. I just stretch that button out. Let's make it line up a little bit, and there we go. So as I say, we're not going to use that just yet. Maybe just adjust it slightly. We're not going to use that just yet in terms of wiring it up, but we are going to come back to it when we make everything sort of work together. But what we can do at this point is create another new screen. And we're going to go back to having an app bar here. We're going to call this one ride confirmation. So I hit create screen. And this is where things start to get a little bit interesting, because this is where we're going to start to play with our map again. Now what I'm going to do is hit Control C, Control V. So I've just copied that map, pasted it, and I've dragged it right over here. I'm going to make it line up with that app bar, but I'm then going to make it considerably smaller because we've got other information to put on this page here. So we've got we've got our map there, and again we'll come back to that later, but because I've copied and pasted it, I've got the style in there already, so I don't need to worry about that. What I can do is say some information here, so I can say your estimated pickup time, and then we'll come back to actually put that in later once we've got that data available. So drag that there. And we've also copied that, paste that. We've also got our estimated drop-off time. So you can start to see some of the data we're going to need here. We're going to have to store, you know, a series of rides. So a ride request, a booking, you could almost call that. We're going to have to keep the sort of, you know, where are you address information, but also the where are you going information. We'll then have to show that on our map. And then based on that kind of, you know, where are you versus where are you going, we kind of need to figure out, well, you know, when are you likely to get picked up and when are you likely to get dropped off? Because if a user doesn't know that, they're very unlikely to actually want to use your app or to book something. And then, of course, probably the most important component what we're going to need here is a Stripe payment. Now, there's a few different options here. Stripe Connect is one worth pointing out. We'll talk about it a little bit more later as well. Stripe Connect can let you pay people in a kind of marketplace style. So it can let you take a payment and then pay some of that towards your driver. We're going to keep it simple for now. We're going to take the Stripe payment component, pop that in here. Again, you can change the button kind of colour, make it a little bit different. make it suit the colour of the app. So there we go, pay now, everything that you expect. In terms of connecting that, in terms of doing anything else with it, we'll worry about that later. And the last thing that I just want to pop on this page is, of course, something about the fare. So I'll copy this again, paste it. Now, I'm not sure if fare is a word that's used worldwide. If you don't know that word, essentially it's just like how much does a taxi ride cost. So, you know, that would look something like that. I mean, it's not going to be 100 quid, I hope. But we'll put fare in there, and again, we'll fill that in with a variable once we've got that available in our database. But essentially, we now need to figure out what's pick-up time, what's the drop-off time, and clearly at some point we'll have to then calculate the amount of money the user is going to be charged. We'll then be able to keep that in here and take it from there. And so we then get to another page, and we're starting to kind of add a few in here. Hit new screen. This one's going to be called awaiting pickup. Again, we'll have an app bar, although this time I'm not going to have a back button, because what I don't want to happen is the user to go back and somehow mess around with the payment they just made. So we're going to have a waiting pickup. I'm going to take this map, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to paste it, so Control C, Control V. I'm then going to move it over here. And one note, by the way, I keep saying Control C and Control V. Actually, if you're on a Mac, so an OS X like this, it's actually the Command key, I believe. So it's Command C and Command V. I'm just so used to calling it that from a Windows computer. So we're going to have a wait and pick up here, which means we need to show, now, as I say, I'm not configuring the map, but we are going to show different stuff on the map depending on whether or not a driver's accepted. So that also means we're going to have some conditional visibility across this entire screen. So I'm going to drag a piece of text in here, and I'm going to call that looking for driver. And I'll make that a little bit bigger, just because it's quite an important piece of text. So we'll have looking for driver. And we'll also just copy that, paste it. We have another bit of text here that says driver is on the way. Now, again, we'll have to set some conditional visibility, but we'll do that a little bit later on when the workflow is there. We'll go through page by page, set that up. And this is where we get to use a slightly more interesting element. We're going to use the countdown. So, we've got it down here. And this is quite an interesting one to configure. So later on we're going to give it a number in seconds to count down from, in terms of hours, minutes, seconds, etc. I don't need hours, I hope, again, for a taxi ride, so I'm just going to specify minutes and seconds. I'm going to square that up with the page, and let's just make sure the format here is that set to the centre. Just centre that. I'm just centering this as well. You can see it looks slightly off kilter. Again, I'm just throwing this together. I'll let you play around with it, and on the demo version of the app I'll try and make sure it's all squared up for you. But there we go, that kind of starts to center everything. So we've got all that. I'm going to add in another button here. It's kind of an interesting one, which is called refresh. So as I mentioned before, Adalo doesn't have an action whereby you can there's a little icon in here. Adalo doesn't have an action whereby you can refresh a page automatically, and so we're going to have to ask the user to do it. It's a little bit of a pain, to be honest, that we can't do that, but you know, it's not the kind of thing I would advise getting hung up on. Here's actually what I'm looking for here. It's not the kind of thing I would advise getting hung up on, because oops, apologies, I've somehow put a rectangle there. I've got no idea how I did that. I wouldn't get hung up on it, because your user's probably not going to matter. You know, if you get to the point where you've got an app like this and it was starting to work, starting to make you a business, a little bit of income, you'll have a lot more resources to fix this problem and find new ways to do it. But, you know, in terms of building like a minimum viable product, something simple that users can use, this kind of implementation is okay. And you know, when I say that with some sort of authority, what I mean is I've built a lot of applications, I've coached a lot of people to build their applications, and very rarely is somebody going to say, I love your app, but I'm not going to use it because I've got to hit a refresh button. Is that something they'll feed back and want you to change eventually? Absolutely, but it's not going to stop anyone using your app. So when we hit that refresh button, what we want to happen is we want a new screen to appear. And I'll call that the refresh screen, very original. And all that's going to happen is I'm going to put a little bit of text on here, and it is going to say refreshing, that's all. and it's just going to be a little temporary placeholder page. Set that height to 34. You might want to experiment with that. The only reason I know to do 34 is because I've now built this a couple of times and I'm kind of familiar with what height works. So what's going to happen is when a user hits refresh, we need to make this await and pick up page refresh, because one thing to bear in mind is we need it to refresh the conditional visibility, but also the maps cannot refresh themselves unless the page refreshes. So even if the pickup address changed in the database, this map would not change until the page itself changes. Therefore, we need to force the page to refresh. So what we're simply going to do is we're going to tell this page here to link to the refresh screen, which it's done. And then on the refresh screen, if I come up, if I select the whole screen itself, I have this part available here that says when a user visits the screen, do something. And I'm going to simply make it link back. So it's just going to go back to the page that it came from before. And if I go into my refresh and just make sure that rather than make that a push transition, I'm going to make that a none transition. Then what's going to happen here is when a user comes in and refreshes a page, it is going to potentially briefly flash this refreshing screen up, and then it's going to come right back here to a new refreshed await and pickup screen. And when I say refreshed, it's equivalent of hitting, the little refresh button in your browser or pressing F5. It will just, clear the screen, reload it again, as if it was, a new load. Your user might not actually see the refreshing screen. What I've found in testing is that usually it shows up the first time and then never again. It's as if the interaction just gets quicker and quicker. So your mileage will vary a bit, but all we're doing here is making a nice quick screen that just tells the user if they do see it, it's refreshing. But hopefully it happens so quickly they don't even notice it. The page just kind of blinks and then suddenly it's reset again. But nonetheless, we'll have to create another screen here. And it's going to look very similar to await and pickup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select await and pickup. I'm going to hit Control C, Control V, or Command C, Command V. Just paste that again. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to call this Ride in Progress. Progress, whatever you want to pronounce it. And this is going to look very, very similar. We're going to just change this text. It's going to say you should arrive. We'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of the countdown. We're going to say you should arrive at, and then later on we'll put that date information in there. So it will say something like you should arrive at 7 PM or at 8 PM or whatever. We'll calculate based on the date. Again, we'll have the same map. You could make the map a little bit bigger this time if you wanted. So you could put, you should arrive, and I'll put the placeholder date in there just so I've got it, but you could say you should arrive at 7:20 PM, and I'm guaranteeing you right now, I've said it here first, I will absolutely forget to replace this later because I've written the time in for you to see. So in a later video when I go, oh, why is that not working, and come back and fix it, now it's because I forgot to put, I didn't put the variable in, and so I'm going to have to come back and do that a little bit later on. So when you see me go, oh, why is it not showing the right data? It's because I'll almost certainly forget to update this placeholder text with the actual variable. So we'll do that later with Adalo's magic text. And if this is your first time watching a nocode.tech video and you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch the basics of Adalo video where I'll explain how this whole magic text function works. But for the meantime, let's just finish this. We're going to take this refresh button. I'm going to rename it to Finish Ride. I'm going to change the icon. Probably some interesting stuff here. I don't know if I type in the word finish, if I type flag maybe. Yeah, could do something like that. Get a nice little kind of little flag entry. And then the last page in this particular flow, if we add another action, is rate your ride. And all this one's going to do is let the user, I'm going to keep a blank screen, I think it looks a little bit better. All this is going to do is let the user rate the driver that they had. So we'll add a few things in here, starting with a nice big image. I pop that there. I'm going to edit the style because I want to make this a big circle with the user's profile picture. I don't have that option yet, but I am going to do that. And I'm going to set the size to 300 and the width and the height to 300 as well. I'm going to set the rounding to the max it will allow, which looks like 150. And we'll just drag that there. So that will be the user's or the driver's picture. We'll then put a big bit of text that says Thanks. How was your ride with? And then we could put a name in there, you know, with a variable a little bit later on. So we will do that. Format this slightly to centre it. Let's add the text size up a little bit. Now it just says how was your ride with because we're not able to put the full name in, but we will do that. But let's use a slightly more interesting component. Pop into installed, grab a star rating, pop it right here. You could add a text field in there if you wanted to leave a comment. Personally, I don't want to make you watch through the complexity of that. I have done that in our building something like Airbnb video if you really want to learn how to do a rating with a comment. Oops. But let's just put a nice little button in there that says finish, and we'll give that a wee icon of a star. In fact, we'll make that slightly more descriptive. Sorry, we'll say rate, driver, and finish. Don't know if all that will fit. Make it a nice big button. Try and make it just line up with that circle. Make sure that's centered. And again, just always having to move these guidelines just to make sure it all fits up. But that looks pretty centered to me. So there we go. Oh, the text is definitely not centered. Nah, mess around with that later. So really only one more thing to add here. We do need to do some onboarding screens, which we can do. But one more thing to add to the sort of main experience, which is just the ability to look at your profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the app bar here on the home screen. And so I was just checking something there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the left icon, and it currently shows up a little menu. You could add that if you wanted multiple options, but I'm just going to select this little account circle icon here. And if I zoom in, just to show you, that creates this nice little profile icon. And what I want the app bar to do, as you guessed, when you hit add action, when you go to a link, we just want to make a profile screen. So I'm just going to add that in, and it's going to look like most profile screens you've seen ever, and in fact it's also going to look like the one I showed you on the little preview of the app. But I'm going to drag it down here because I just want to kind of separate it visually on my canvas from this little kind of flow of things here. So I've got this profile down here, drag it up a wee bit, and what you want to put on this is entirely up to you. I'm mostly doing this for kind of demonstration purposes. You know, a little profile I think ties the app together. So let's say I'm going to have a picture of the user, so they're going to have their profile photo. Why am I trying to add an action? I can hit edit style. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller than the one I did on the rating. We'll do that, we'll hit round and let's see how big that looks. That's probably still a little bit too big. We do 150 and 150 there. So put that there. Drag a little bit of text in. Just going to make sure that doesn't run off the screen. I'm going to put full name. Drag that over slightly. I'm going to copy that, paste that, drag it down. I'm going to say X rides taken. So X is just going to be a little placeholder right now. I mean, that could be 10, 20, whatever, but eventually I'll be able to actually update that with information from a database that says 10 rides taken. Copy that, paste that again, Control C, Control V, and this time I'm going to call this one a rider rating. So we'll say, I don't know, something out of 5 rider rating, something like that. And then another thing you probably just want to do here, really simple, is just bring a list in. That'll in future be a list of all the rides that a user's taken. You can call that ride history. Again, let's give that like a little bit like we did in the location search. Let's just dull that down slightly. Don't really want it to be bold. I just don't think it quite looks right. And there you go. So that's just what a profile is going to look like. You can add as much as you like there, take as much away. One little thing that might be cool that I would recommend is just having something that kind of calculates the total fare for every ride a user's ever had. Something like that might be pretty cool. But other than that, that is more or less what we want to create. Now we'll do just one last bit, which is the onboarding. It's going to be slightly unfinished until we create our database. But if we go ahead to the sign up, and I'm just going to delete these links at the minute to home because I'm going to add a couple of pages in here. So what we're going to say is when the user signs up, we want to take them to another page. So we're going to create, we're going to go to link, create new screen. We're going to call this one Just call it onboarding, for example. If anybody has been nervously watching my battery at the side, there you go, I've just fixed that. So we'll call that one onboarding. Drag that right back up here, drag it a little bit further, and apologies, I'm using a mouse, a trackpad, sorry, so rather than a mouse, so it's quite hard to drag stuff when you're using a trackpad, but there we go, we've got that. And we'll fill that out in a little second, but it's going to essentially be where we take all the address information for the user. One thing I want to point out, I don't have a submit button here, so if I say I want to update the logged in user, I'm going to get some information I can change, and I'll mess about with that in the next video. But you'll notice the usual submit button that should show up down here is not showing. The reason for this is you have to go in and hit edit styles, because by default this button is the colour of your secondary colour. So it's making the button white, which is why you can't see it. If I hit black, the button mysteriously shows up. And there you go. I'll give that a little bit of rounding as well, just for a little bit of cool factor there. So we've got our onboarding screen. That's how you fix that problem. Again, we'll change and configure the information on the next video. But for now, instead of linking back, I want to add one more page, just one more, which is upload profile photo. And this is just going to be a little screen where of course we can upload the profile photo. And actually, you might want to add a little check in here as well. So if we consider this, I don't know what I did there. There we go. I accidentally dragged away the app bar. You can see I'm kind of again struggling with my mouse pad. But if we kind of move this sign up page away over here, and move the onboarding a little bit back and just straighten this up. So I want to take the image upload here, but I'm going to make one other change that's pretty important. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add my image picker in, which absolutely will grab the profile photo from the user. You can configure that if you want. You could set the rounding right up. You could do 300, do 300, and there you go. You've got a button for the user to upload. Oops, need to increase that rounding. So you get a button there for the user to upload. But the other thing that I'm going to do is, at some point we need to decide if the user is a rider or a driver. So you could have a button in here that, you know, you could just have the two separate apps and just have the user come in and essentially just, you know, because they're on the rider app, they're a rider, and similarly you could have a driver app for the driver. But the other thing that you might want to do is have a button here that says, you know, I am a driver, and then you could have that button essentially go and either take them to another app, you could finish their login process here, and then, you know, have something conditional visibility that shows up here and tells them to get the other app. You could even, if you really wanted, you could just build the driver experience into this app as well. There's nothing to stop you. If you watch our Airbnb video, I talked a lot about in there about how to do two different types of users within the same app, so you could do that. But just a little bit of a suggestion. I'm not going to put it here. I'll just have one app for each. So I'll just say finish sign up. Oops. Oh dear, it's very hard to type when people are watching you. And we'll just use that same wee flag that we used as well. So there we go, I quite like that. And we take the back button away too, just because the form won't save the information. If they do go back, that's a bit of a pain. So there we go, finish sign up. You can grab their profile photo, they can finish sign up, and that will of course take them straight to the home page. So that in a nutshell is what the UI and UX is going to look like for our Uber app. And you know, that's a heavy little bit of work we just got out of the way. In the next video then we're going to go a little bit more in depth, start looking at our database, and then of course we'll start looking at how we can put together the workflows, how we can do the whole Integromat section, and of course build the driver app out itself as well.